Hello, and welcome back to the True Grit series, where we explore topics on mental health, resilience, and tenacity. And today, I'm joined by Professor Dr. Andrew Mohanraj, or Andrew, truly distinguished as a consultant psychiatrist, president of the Malaysian Mental Health Association, board member of the World Federation for Mental Health. So many accomplishments, Andrew. And tell us more about your illustrious career in the field of mental health.
Thank you, Azran. Thank you for having me on the show. I am currently involved, or have undertaken a consultancy to provide mental health services for refugees and asylum seekers whose intended destination is Australia. So that keeps me occupied quite a bit. In addition to that, I wear other hats as well, and I'd like to mention here that the World Federation is actually organizing an international mental health congress in London in June this year, and the patron for that congress is none other than our King's daughter, Tengku Puteri Raja Tengku Puteri Iman Afzan Al Sultan Abdullah, who will also be giving the opening address. So that's the first for Malaysia, and I invite you to come and join us in London. And yes, I also teach at Taylor's University, where I'm the adjunct professor of psychiatry.
Fantastic. Well, let's start our conversation around mental health in the context of this pandemic that we've all gone through.
Yeah.
What have you seen with respect to Malaysians dealing with this crisis?
I think the mental health dimension of this crisis is truly has been a great challenge for all of us, not only people who continue to have symptoms suggestive of psychological decompensation as a result of this pandemic, and even judging by the number of calls that we have received at the Malaysian Mental Health Association's helpline, we know that there are many people who have developed psychological distress as a consequence of this pandemic.
Right.
And of course, the issues, bread and butter issues, job security, even if they hold a job, they're not sure for how long they'll have, to be able to hold on to the job, the change in work culture, working from home, relationship issues as a result of that. You see the whole spectrum of manifestations. And you also see increase in substance abuse. Ironically, during the pandemic, people actually consumed more alcohol and used more substance compared to the time prior to the pandemic. So this also has got an implication on mental health issues. But generally speaking, you see an increase in the cases of anxiety and depression.
So let's talk about how do we understand mental health as a health condition, but what also makes mental health different from other health conditions?
In psychiatry or in mental health, we are encouraged to adapt the biopsychosocial model. And that's what I think makes mental health professionals a little bit different in their approach towards things, because we have to really consider not just the biological component of it, but the psychological and the social component, and not individually, but also to see where there is an overlap and an interaction between all these components. And I must say, Azran, that in Malaysia, we are pretty fortunate in the sense that all of us can be considered to have some spiritual inclination. I mean, that's clearly seen by the religious festivities and how people are enthusiastic about. I think that adds another dimension to it.
Is there a specific anecdote that you like to share that emphasizes spirituality as part of mental health care?
Oh, yes. I do have quite a number of experiences, but that one thing that really made an impact on me personally as well is when I went to Aceh after the tsunami of 2004. And of course, I was armed with all the principles of psychiatry and mental health interventions that you learn in the Oxford textbook of psychiatry. And then I realized that some of this was not applicable there because of the way they looked at life. And upon investigation, I found out that it was their spirituality that really helped them look at life in a completely different perspective. I had this elderly woman who told me, doctor, you would expect all of us to be devastated by this, but you look around you, we are picking up our lives. Sure, we were upset, we have lost friends, family, but this word tsunami is not an Indonesian word, it's not an Achinese word. We've never heard of this word before. Something to do with Japan. And why did the tsunami strike us now? And it doesn't make sense at all. In our folklore, we have heard of big waves coming, but never to this extent, So if it had come here, that means there must have been a plan, and it's God's plan. And while we don't understand this, we accept it. And it is not for us to dwell on it too much and to question it as to why it happened, but it must have happened for a reason.
Sure.
So as human beings, we should just pick up and move on. And that was something that very refreshing to hear in life.
Yeah, Andrew, let's start by talking about some of the early signs and symptoms. So for the public to know whether they're going through is a condition where they need to seek help, because many people are reluctant when it comes to mental health to seek help.
Well, it will also actually really depend on eventually what sort of a condition that they have, you see. But generally speaking, across the board, in all conditions, some of the initial features of it would be isolating oneself, not having the energy or the interest or the motivation to do things that they normally would have done. There could be some self-neglect in terms of neglecting their appearance and not paying attention to hygiene. And some of the features that would cause alarm in the very beginning would be in terms of performance. And in addition to this, some people might also tend to cope with their early distress by self-medication, and that could involve using increased use of alcohol or using illicit substances, even drinking copious cups of coffee, or smoking excessively.
If I, as an individual, can resonate with what you've described, right? I feel like I'm being isolated, my work performance suffers. What are the things that I can try to do to get back on track?
For us to understand or to accept that we might have some issues here, it's one of the most difficult things to do, because almost immediately the reaction would be to deny and say that no, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm just undergoing a difficult patch, and we want to accept the fact that we might have a psychological situation. So I think if we do find ourselves having some form of distress, the immediate thing to do is to read about it or talk to a friend, talk to somebody whom we trust, and ask them, do you think that you feel that I've changed in any way?
Right.
And that might help us come to a decision. And number two, I think it's also good to know that it's pretty much common for people to undergo these psychological decompensation every now and then, and it is possible for us to pick up from that. It's okay to struggle with that, and we can overcome this with the right intervention and support by family and friends.
Andrew, I also want to wrap up, right? Talk about mental health really as health and positive health, and not necessarily an illness or a weakness. What can people do to maintain positive mental health?
Yeah, okay. I think the first and foremost, is to understand that we all have our limitations in life, and to accept these limitations. Of course, we try to improve and do things better all the time, but there are some things that we can do and some that we cannot do. So to accept that, and to also to celebrate the things that we can do and can do well. And in addition to that, I think much has been said about maintaining physical health. That's also really important, because despite all this positive outlook that we may have in life, and if we neglected our physical health, not doing enough exercises, eating nutritional food, and planning out our time well, then I think that is going to have a bearing on our mental health as well. The WHO is, I just completed a consultancy with them, and there are some catchphrases that we are encouraged to say during talk shows like this. And one thing that we go on saying it ad nauseum is the fact that physical health and mental health are two sides of the same coin.
Indeed.
So, when one is affected, the other also will be eventually affected. So that's something that if we kept in mind, I think it will lead to us maintaining well-being.
Well, with that, Andrew, thank you very much for sharing with us how physical health and mental health are two sides of the same coin, and that we need to look at mental health not just from the biological point of view, but the psychological aspects and the social support networks that we need to put in place. Here's to a more healthy and productive, healthy Malaysia, both physically and mentally.
Thank you
for joining us.
Thank you.